So even those good people who are writing, all good people, those well-intentioned people who are writing, all lives matter or white lives matter, what they're doing is they're causing people harm or sadness or institutional racism without the intent, but it's the same impact. And I think for me the dishwasher was.
But I also think there's a degree of doubt for me if people don't know, you
Oh
know?
really? Oh
I
wow,
think when
shit.
you, I think there's obviously often people who don't understand their impact, but I had a different example, which was about a funeral, and I took it out because I thought that's maybe, like really inappropriate. But if you go to somebody's, funeral and, that grandma just passed away and, you also have a grandma, you wouldn't go into like somebody's funeral and be like, but all grandmas matter, right? Which
My,
I mean, they do.
yeah.
And I think is again, it's what's the purpose? What is the purpose when you say this? And I want people to pause and think about, what is this fragility? We talk about white fragility often in anti-racist work. And I don't, there's all forms of fragility. I think there's male fragility too, when people are told about, sexist behavior that they're reproducing.
Mm-hmm.
It's holding that discomfort. I think it's this place of being uncomfortable that we need to learn to sit with, because that's the first step. That's really far away from where we want people to be in terms of taking action. But if we can push through that first gut visceral reaction of discomfort because you don't like the word white, or because you don't want to be told that there was colonialism in your country, or you don't want to own that we have privilege, because people think when you say you have privilege that we're saying your life is perfect
Mm.
and there's nothing horrible that ever happened to you. And that's not what people say. Like when we say we hold privilege, I hold a ton of privilege in different ways. It's about accounting which barriers did I not have in my way to make it into this room.
I've heard the example used before. It's an American sporting metaphor, but for those let's call it softball rather than baseball. New Zealanders understand softball. That people, a lot of people who hit home runs don't acknowledge they actually started on third base. And I was talking to someone recently and thinking, someone who has had a lot of upset in their life and a lot of difficulties. It's like I've said to them, you're in the car park. You're not even coming up to bat yet. If you're in the car park, you got to get up to bat, hit the ball, and then get all the way around the bases. Some people who stand up and shout of their success, not acknowledging that they were actually already standing on third base the day they were born, or for whatever other reason.
Yeah, and I think that goes for a lot of things. I think as a person who now gets to speak on these issues, I don't also start from the garage, right? There's decades and generations of people who've done this work, whose shoulders people like me stand on, and
Yep.
that's why we can do this work in this particular moment in time in these ways that we can do it. So I think that also needs acknowledging, because this is work it's been done for a really long time, and if we just learned to look into our archives and listen to our elders, we'd also know these reiterations of these particular moments in time and what we can take from them, even what we can take from some of their failures.
It kind of is a little bit sad though as well, because I think of that saying of, if I've seen further, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. That means there's been giants before you doing this, and we're still here. I mean, one could actually say it's worse. I mean, I don't want to actually put values on it because, people will straight away bring up the examples of owning one another back in the 1700s. But, if we believe that quote, and if there's already been giants, and now it's people like you are able to stand on their shoulders, what the heck? What is that feels a little deflating, because there's already been giants and we're still here.
I think one of the things that also gets said is, oh, why do they want so much? Right?
Mm.
I do think that there's definitely progress. I think there's definitely things that I can say about my life that wouldn't have been possible if I'd been born in my mother's generation or in my grandmother's generation. So I think I do want to acknowledge that, obviously, like particularly legally, there's there's been a lot of improvement. But at the same time, when, you know, particularly around settlements or, you know, racism and representation and participation, people often say, oh, but now it's reverse, right? Like now it's really hard being a young white man in New Zealand. I actually heard that. And I think, okay, that's interesting. But again, you know, like the teacher in me says, what's the purpose of that? You know, why do you say that? Because you feel like having adjusted something, a tiny little fraction, makes it feel like you've had everything stripped away from you. Right? I think those, again, like I think on an educational level, those conversations are slightly different than on an action level. So I feel like for me, juggling these two hats is hard sometimes, because as an educator, I have a different approach than I have as a person who wants to see change in society. I think those are different, and they maybe also have to be different. And I think I have a different kind of patience in the classroom, or as an educator, I have a different form of patience than I have as a person who's trying to see some of these issues changed.